Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about who's your one. Noticing somebody, praying for them by name, caring about them in small, ordinary ways, and being ready to invite them in when the door opens. And I'd bet a lot of you have actually done it. You've prayed for somebody specific. You've sent a text you weren't totally sure you should send. You've had a conversation that felt a little bit risky. Maybe you've even invited someone to church. So let me ask you something. What happened after that? For some of you, maybe something did happen, and if that's so, that's wonderful. Keep on going. But if I'm being honest with you, I think for a lot of us, the answer is not much. They said thanks and changed the subject, or they didn't come. Or the conversation you'd been working up that nerve to have for 2 weeks barely even registered with them. Or maybe you just reached out and got silence back. That's the moment I want to talk about today. There's usually this moment where good intentions quietly die. It's not in some dramatic failure, just in the slow fade after nothing visible happens. Here's what tends to happen in our heads when silence sets in. We start telling ourselves a story. I guess that didn't work. I guess I'm not cut out for this. Well, they're clearly not interested, so I'm just going to leave them alone. Or maybe even the sneakier, quieter version. Well, that was a nice few weeks, but I guess we're moving on to whatever's next. I want to push back on every one of those conclusions because none of them are true. That was never supposed to be a quick campaign where we just go hard for a few weeks, then we count our results and pat ourselves on the back and get back to life as normal. It's not a sprint, and it's definitely not a sales pitch with a quota attached. It's a way of life we're learning to live together. And here's the one thing nobody tells you going in. The first act of faith was just putting yourself out there at all. The second act, the much harder one, is not quitting when nothing obvious happens. So here's the phrase I want to leave you with today. Don't force it and don't quit. Those two are doing different work, and most of us naturally drift towards one or the other. Some of us, when we feel the pressure, we start forcing it. We push too hard, and we can turn a normal conversation awkward by steering it too hard towards church. We start treating the person like a project we're trying to close out. That's forcing it, and it almost always backfires because people can feel when they're being managed. A lot of us go in the opposite direction, though. We don't want to be the pushy person, so the moment things go quiet, we just stop. We prayed for somebody twice and nothing happened, so we quietly stop praying. We invited somebody once and they said no, and we never brought it up again. Not because we made some decision to give up, but just because we sort of drifted away from it. That's quitting, and that's just as much of a failure to love as forcing it is. It just feels more polite. There's a small story Jesus tells in Mark chapter 4, and I think about it a lot when I'm in this exact spot. A man scatters seed on the ground, and then, this is literally how Jesus describes it, the man sleeps and gets up. Day after day, going about his life, while the seed sprouts and grows without him having the faintest idea how. The ground just produces on its own. First a stalk, then a head of grain, then a full kernel inside it. The farmer didn't make any of it happen through sheer will or effort. He scattered the seed, and then something happened underground, completely out of his sight and entirely out of his control. That's such a relief. Honestly, because it means the outcome was never sitting on your shoulders to begin with. Paul says something similar to this to the church in Corinth, that they were busy arguing about whose ministry mattered more. Some of them followed one preacher, some followed another, and Paul basically tells them to settle down. He planted, somebody else watered, but God was the one who made anything grow at all. Neither the planter nor the water gets to take credit for the harvest. That belongs to God. So if you've been praying for somebody and nothing visible happened yet, that doesn't mean you failed. It just means you're in the part of the story where the seed is still underground. And underground isn't the same as nothing happening. Now, I do want to be honest with you about something because I think love means telling the truth while there's still time to do something about it. We're an older congregation here at Solid Ground, and we love each other. We've got history together, and there are people in this church who've been showing up and serving and giving faithfully for decades. That matters more than I can say. But if we're not reaching new people, if we're not making room at the table for folks who aren't already there, we have to be honest about what that means for our future. I'm not saying that to scare anybody or to suggest that we're standing at the edge of a cliff. I'm saying it because a church usually ends up with whatever it actually practices, not just whatever it says it wants. If we want renewal, but we organize our whole life around comfort, we'll get comfort for a while. And comfort has a way of making the room smaller every year. That's not a threat. It's just how it works. And the answer to that isn't panic. It's the same answer as always: faithfulness. Plant the seed, water what you can, and trust God for the part that's His to do. That's not passive. A farmer still has to get up and walk out into the field every day. He just doesn't have to manufacture the miracle himself. So let's talk about what's actually happening in a lot of you, even if it doesn't feel like much yet. A lot of you have started to notice people you used to walk right past. Maybe it's the neighbor you've waved at for years but never really talked to. Maybe it's the coworker who jokes around constantly but seems tired underneath it. Maybe it's an adult child you've been worried about for a long time. That shift in attention isn't nothing. It's actually one of the first things that happens in someone who's starting to pay attention the way that Jesus did. Go and read the Gospels and notice how often Jesus is the person in the room who actually sees somebody everyone else had already written off. The woman at the well that the rest of the town avoided. Zacchaeus up in a tree. Easy for everyone else to ignore or resent. If you started noticing people differently than you used to, something real is already changing in you, whether or not it's changed anything in them yet. And maybe the bigger shift is that people have started having names instead of categories. It's one thing to pray, God, help us reach people. That's a fine prayer. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's a different thing entirely to pray, God, help me to love my son well. Or, God, can you open a door with my neighbor? Or, God, don't let me give up on her. When somebody has a name, you stop managing a project and start carrying an actual person. You start caring whether they're hurting, whether their marriage is struggling, whether they've been burdened by a church before, whether they even know what to believe, not because caring might lead somewhere, but because they actually matter to you now. That kind of love is slower than the version where you're chasing a result. It's also a lot more honest And people can usually tell the difference between someone who's genuinely interested in them and someone who's working an angle. That's what I'd call faithful presence, staying lovingly available to someone over time, whether or not they're giving anything to you back yet. It doesn't mean ignoring boundaries or chasing somebody who's told you flat out that they want to be left alone. That's not faithfulness. That's just being a nuisance with good intentions. But for the person who hasn't shut the door, faithful presence, it still looks like praying for them, still asking how they're doing, still being the same toward them in month 4 as you were in week 1. Most people don't come to faith in some dramatic lightning bolt moment. For a lot of us, it really was a slow thaw. Something softening a little bit at a time, long before anybody could point to the exact day that it happened. That also means we get to relax a little bit about what these conversations are supposed to look like. A lot of us hear evangelism, and immediately we're picturing having to defend the whole faith in one sitting, answering every hard question perfectly, steering things towards Jesus with all the subtlety of a forklift. But honestly, most of this starts a lot more ordinarily than that. It starts with things like asking somebody how they're really doing, and then really listening to the answer instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. It starts with noticing when someone seems off and just asking about it. And when the door does open, you don't need a script. I don't have all the answers, but I know Jesus has been faithful to me is a complete sentence. So is, I've been praying for you. Or, would it be okay if I prayed for you right now? That's not a technique. That's just an honest person in an ordinary conversation. Invitation still matters in all of this. I don't want us to get so cautious that nobody ever invites anybody to anything. But the best invitations grow out of a relationship instead of being bolted into one. Sometimes it's church. Sometimes it's just a coffee or a meal or finally asking if they'd want to talk more about faith sometime. The question isn't, how do I force this invitation to happen? It's, what's the next loving thing I can do here? Some weeks that's inviting. Some weeks it's just listening. Some weeks it's simply staying available and praying while you wait for the door to open at all. I also think we need to get better at celebrating the right things. If the only story we count is, I invited someone, they showed up, and they got saved on the spot, most of us are going to conclude that we just don't have a story worth telling. But you do. Praying for somebody by name for 6 weeks straight is a story. Checking on a neighbor who's going through something hard is a story. Inviting a friend who said no and staying warm towards them anyway is absolutely a story. Maybe an even better one. Because that kind of character, that takes real character to live that out. So, if you've tried something these past few weeks and nothing visible has happened yet, don't read that as your permission to just move on. Read it as the place where this actually starts to become real. Paul tells the church in Galatia not to grow weary in doing good, because at just the right time, there's a harvest coming for the people who don't give up. That promise doesn't come with a calendar attached. It just means that quitting is the only thing that is sure to produce nothing. Some of you are praying for people who felt far from God for years. A spouse, an adult child, an old friend, somebody who got hurt by church a long time ago and never really came back from it. I know that gets tiring. I know there are nights where you've wondered, like, what is the point anymore? But God is more patient than you are, and He's far better at this than you are, and He loves the person you're praying for far more than you do. You were never the one responsible for changing their heart. You're just invited to stay faithful while He does it. So here's where I want to leave it. Don't try to force the whole story to happen this week. Just take the next faithful step. Pray for them by name again. Look for one more ordinary way to show that you really care. Ask another real question and actually listen to the answer. And if the door isn't open yet, don't kick it down. Just stay available and let it be wide open when it's ready to be. That's how this becomes a life instead of a season. Just not one big push, but prayer after prayer, conversation after conversation, one small act of faithfulness stacked on top of the last one. Over time, that changes people that we're praying for. And it changes us. And eventually, it changes what kind of church we are. The kind of place where new people aren't an interruption to what we're already doing, but part of the reason that God still has us here. So don't force it and don't quit. Faithfulness was never what we settle for when this doesn't work the way we hoped. Faithfulness is how love keeps going while God does the part only He can do. And He's still doing it. So keep praying, keep showing up, keep an eye out for the next door wherever it opens. Love takes time. And that's not bad news. That might be exactly where the real work begins.